We do have some modifiers that allow us to work with subds in a couple of different ways. So let's have a look at some of those. I'm going to create a box here again. Something like that. And I'm going to convert this to an editable poly. Here we go. Okay, so we've seen the first method of working with subds, which is simply to take an editable poly object like this one and turning on the use NURM subdivision option on. And basically that turns it into a subd instantly. However, we do have a few modifiers that we can use for subds, and they have a few different tools that allow us to work a little bit differently. So let me show you that. If we go up to the modifiers main menu item up here, and we go to the subdivision surfaces category, you can see that we have ourselves 3 modifiers that we can use in 3ds Max to work with subds. So let's start with the one at the top of the list called the Sds Modifier. Okay, and if we go ahead and apply that modifier to our object, it looks like nothing happened, except the normals of the polygons here look like they got messed up. Okay, so if we expand here to the modifier, we can see that we have access to vertices, edges, polygons, and elements similar to when working with an editable poly object. Okay, a lot of the shortcuts stay the same as well. For example, 1 is for vertex, 2 is for edge, 3 this time is for polygon, and 4 is for element. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Okay, in the HSDS parameters, that's a mouthful. We can see here that we have ourselves a base level kind of a modifier stack, a mini modifier stack, and what this does, we're going to see in a moment what it does. It basically just houses the different levels of subdivision. So what is the HSDS modifier? What makes it so special? Well, this modifier, what it does is it creates hierarchical subdivision surfaces. What that basically means is that you can create subdivision in one level, move up to another level and subdivide more on another level, and another one, and another one. It just keeps stacking up on top and top and top. So that probably makes no sense if someone explains that to you that way. So let me actually show you so you can visually get a demonstration of what it does. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, say, this polygon that's here on this side. Alright, and what I'll do, let's see what we're going to do here. Let's just go ahead and hit the subdivide button down here. And when I do that, you notice that just that polygon got subdivided. So that one polygon was subdivided one time, so it broke it down into 4 different polygons. You can see that one polygon is now 1, 2, 3, 4 polygons. Okay, and you notice that I can't select any other polygons on the object. I can only select these right here. Why is that? Well, that's because we're now at level 1 subdivision. Once we subdivide one time, we're automatically in level 1. If we subdivide again, we'll be at level 2. So every time you subdivide, this thing keeps track. Okay, it keeps track, a record of the level of subdivision that you're at. So the higher the subdivision level, the more subdivision we have on our object here. If we go back to the base level simply by clicking on it here in this little subdivision stack, you notice it becomes highlighted in this cyan color. Okay, and you notice that we can also select the wireframe of the original low-res object. Okay, so we can select this polygon here and we can move it around. Similar to when we were working with the NURMS toggle earlier. Okay, so that's basically how that works. And if we click on level 1 again, all the levels below it become highlighted in cyan to show that basically editor that video. Start again, 3, 2, 1. To show the different levels here that we're working with. So right now we're working with level 1 subdivision. So basically what this allows me to do is affect each one of these little 4 new polygons by itself. You also notice that all the objects or all the subcomponent objects here that belong to level 1 subdivision are shown here in a yellow wireframe and not white like the rest of the object. Anything that's white we cannot select. Okay? So what I can do here is take, say, this polygon here, and I can hit subdivide, and now we're at level 2. Now that polygon was broken down into 4 separate polygons, and if I select a couple of these and subdivide again, those now become subdivided again. So you can see how we start to add detail to one specific area of this object. Okay, so let me actually go ahead and undo some of this stuff. So we're back to the base level over here. Okay, this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the top of this object here. I'm going to subdivide that one time. Okay. Now I'm going to take the vertex here in the middle and I'm going to subdivide that. And you can see as we continue to subdivide, this thing just continues to just basically add more detail to that area. So I'll move that vertex up. I'll hit subdivide. Move this new vertex up. I'll hit subdivide. Move this new vertex up. I'll hit subdivide. I'll move this vertex up. I'll hit subdivide. And you see basically what I'm doing is I'm just adding more and more detail to this object, as you can see. Only where it needs it. Okay? Alright, so if I go down here to my advanced options, you can see I have an adaptive subdivision parameter here. If I go ahead and hit that, I get this adaptive subdivision window where I can add detail or remove it. So let me add some more detail. You can also choose a few different parameters, so go ahead and try these out for your specific object and see how much detail you can add. So I'm just going to go ahead and add low. Okay, and what that did is it subdivided the entire mesh, as you can see, and we're now at level 8. Okay, so it took everything and it subdivided it to level 8, and basically now we have more detail in certain areas than in others. Okay, but you could see that you can only edit detail based on the level that you're at. So if I'm at level 8, since I subdivided this vertex up here into level 8, so we now have all these new vertices, we can only edit those. We can't edit the ones down here. If we want to edit those, we have to go down our levels until we get to that level when we made those edits. So now you can see I have these vertices that I can edit at level 4. At level 5, I can only edit these. At level 6, I edit these. Level 7, these up here. And level 8, these way up here. Okay? So what's the purpose? What's the point of this hierarchical subdivision surfaces modifier? That's a good question, and to this day, it's still actually a mystery that no one knows. No, I'm just kidding. The purpose of this modifier is to go ahead and it's to be used as a finishing tool. After you've worked on an object and you're happy with the way it looks, you use this modifier to basically add detail only where you need it. So essentially what I can do at this point is I can take my modifier stack, collapse it, turn that back into an editable poly, and now I have myself a basic editable poly object that has detail only where I need it. So for example, I can go to freeform up here in the graphite modeling tools. I can go to paint deform. I can maybe take the noise brush here, okay, and I could take and add some noise to this object here. So say for example I was trying to do this strange object, okay, this strange alien type object or something, whatever this thing is, and I needed to create this noise on the top up here like this, but I didn't need to create noise at the bottom, or at least not a lot of noise. I want to create noise that's kind of bigger. See this? So if I come in here with the noise brush and I just paint deform here, you can see the areas that have less geometry have less noise because there's less geometry to work with. And this area in the top gets a lot of noise because there's so many more vertices in this area. So you can see, so I can create this type of object here. Okay? So it can be very useful for that. When you need a lot of detail in a certain specific area of your polygon object, but you don't need all that detail everywhere. Because if I just go ahead and use standard subdivision surfaces with this, the NURMS toggle, it would have subdivided the entire object evenly, and maybe that's not what I wanted. So now I can get this type of shape right here. Okay? So something like this, where I have less deformation on the bottom, so it's smoother, but on the top, I have a lot more deformation, so I end up with something like this. Okay? So there you go. That's the hierarchical subdivision modifier. Basically extremely useful for when you have to do local subdivision only on specific parts of your object. So let me go ahead and close that. And let's create another box here quickly. Turn that into a editable poly there, just convert it. Okay, so let's go back to modifiers. Let's go back to subdivision surfaces and mesh smooth, okay? Mesh smooth and turbo smooth are pretty similar, but there's a couple of differences. we'll go to Mesh Smooth first. Okay. First of all, Mesh Smooth is a modifier that's been around with 3ds Max for a very long time, longer than Turbosmooth, but more on that later. Here's the Mesh Smooth. Okay. With Mesh Smooth, it basically works the same way as doing the NURBS toggle on the regular editable poly object. By default, it uses the NURBS subdivision method. So basically, these are different algorithms to control the smoothing of the object. So basically, these are different algorithms to control the smoothing of the object here. Now, NURBS, we've already seen what it does. Okay, there's a couple of others we can choose. We can choose Classic, which basically is going to keep more of a hard type shape, more of a mechanical shape to it. Doesn't make it so organic and round. Also, at corners, where it puts triangles together or quads together, it'll actually form triangles. Okay, so this form of subds actually works with triangles, believe it or not. And then we have quad output. And quad output works very similar to NURBS, only the exception is that the quad output does a better job of keeping to the original shape. Okay, so remember the original shape of this is a cube. You can see the quad output looks closer to the cube. It looks almost like a cube that kind of looks puffed up on the sides. Okay, so it has a little bit of a round shape to it, as you can see. And the NURBS just makes a rounder, smoother object, so it interpolates a lot more. Okay, so let's just keep it at NURBS for now. So again, we can change the iterations here, just like before. Okay, a very important parameter here is the render value iteration. Basically, right now, if we give this thing 3 iterations and we render out, both in the viewport and in the renderer, it'll look like it has 3 iterations, okay? But let's say we need a lot of iterations, but if we increase too many, the viewport navigation is going to become slow and performance is going to drop and even stability can drop. So what we can do is we can have maybe just 1 iteration in the viewport or maybe 2, but when you render out, you can check on this little box here next to iterations, and you can add maybe 5 or 6 iterations, or maybe even 7. So when you render this thing out, it renders out perfectly smooth with 7 iterations. But your viewport remains perfectly intact with only 2 iterations, so you get kind of a low-res preview of the object while you work on it, just so you can have more stability and 3ds Max viewport doesn't freeze up and crash on you. Just with the NURBS toggle, same thing. We also have some controls down here. We can control the isoline display. We can also control the cage. So when we go ahead and we edit this thing out, we can actually see the cage. Now one thing that's pretty important here to remember is that with the Mesh Smooth modifier, we can't really edit and modify the object too much besides moving some edges and vertices around. So for example, we can't take a polygon and subdivide it, cut it up, anything like that. We can't just take edges and do chamfers and connect edge loops together and stuff like that. We just don't have access to those tools. So the Mesh Smooth modifier is best used at the end when you're finished modeling your low-res object, okay? And one other thing about Mesh Smooth is that most of its options, if not all of them with the exception of a couple, works the same way as doing the NURBS toggle on the object. So Mesh Smooth, there's really no point to it. You really don't need to use it. It's an old modifier. It's kind of obsolete. At least I think of it that way. I never use it, and I really don't see much use to it simply because nowadays 3ds Max has the NURBS toggle, which works very similar to Mesh Smooth, okay? And we don't really need to add a Mesh Smooth modifier. But it's good to know about it, and good to know it's there, and good to know what it's used for, okay? And since it's on the topic of subds, I thought it'd be important to cover it. So let's take this box object here. Let's take the NURBS toggle off. Let's go to that last modifier, which is the Turbosmooth Modifier. Okay. So with Turbosmooth Modifier, we get even less options than Mesh Smooth. So what's the difference between the two? Well, the main difference between the Mesh Smooth Modifier and the Turbosmooth Modifier is that Turbosmooth is newer. It's not new to 3ds Max 2010. It's actually been around for a few versions of 3ds Max, but the Turbosmooth did come after Mesh Smooth, and it's optimized. It's faster and it's more reliable than Mesh Smooth. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let me take this guy here. I'm going to make a clone. Okay, I'm going to take the first one here. Let me just change the color real quick so that we can see. So the green one is going to have, let me take off the Turbosmooth modifier and let me apply the Mesh Smooth modifier to the green one over here. And I'm going to increase the iterations to 5. Okay, and I'm going to turn the isoline display off. I'm going to take this guy here that has the turbo smooth and give it 5 iterations. So both of them are exactly the same. They both have 5 iterations, so they have the same exact amount of geometry, same amount of polygons. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the Edit Poly object here for the green object, and I'm going to turn on the Show End Result button down here. Okay, for the modifier stack, so I can see the end result. I'm going to take this guy and do the same thing. So I'll select Edit Poly, turn on the end result. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the green object here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Edit Poly object, go to Polygon mode, select this polygon on this side. I'm going to go to the Graphite Modeling Tools. I'll go to Subdivision, go to the Tessellate options, and I'll hit OK. I'm going to grab this vertex that I just created, this new one, and I'm going to move it around. You can see as I move it around, 3ds Max's performance drops significantly. You can see it's very slow to react. It cannot keep up with my mouse movements. It's almost running in slow motion. Okay? That's not good. Now let's have a look at the object with the Turbosmooth modifier. So let's go to the Editable Poly, select this polygon, go to Subdivision, Tessellate, hit OK. And let's grab that same vertex. See what happens when we move it around. As you can see, there's absolutely no difference between this and a low-res object. As I move this around, the object reacts appropriately. It's reacting in real time, and it's keeping up with all my mouse movements, almost like if Sds weren't even there. Okay, so you could see there's an amazing difference in performance and stability between the two modifiers. So Mesh Smooth is older, it's not optimized, and it's very slow. Turbosmooth is newer. It's very highly optimized and has fast performance. Okay, it's very performance friendly and allows me to make changes and edits to my object in real time without having to worry about my viewport slowing down and running into performance issues with 3ds Max. Okay, so the Turbosmooth modifier again has very simple parameters, iterations, the isoline display. That's pretty much all you really need to worry about with this modifier. So I recommend using the Turbosmooth modifier when performance becomes an issue. Okay, so there we go. That's going to do it for this video. Now that you saw how to work with Sds and basics of it, we can actually get started in the project. We have a very big project coming up. We have a lot of stuff to work on. So we're just going to jump in and just get our hands dirty with this and get going.